that season of your life is over. Done. Period.
Yeah.
Book closed. Door closed. As a new practitioner now, this new chapter of your career, you don't have anything to prove to anybody.
Welcome to the HairX Friends We Got This podcast, where we share our thoughts on the pharmacy profession, experiences as healthcare providers, and explore our identities as two women of color going after it all.
Hey, as we share our stories, we hope you laugh, maybe cry, and feel inspired as you get to know us. Because at the end of the day, friends,
we got this.
Hey, hi everybody.
Hi everyone. Hello. It is already May when we upload this episode. Isn't that so? It's like almost half the year. Ugh.
That means mid-year is here soon.
Yeah, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I know, look at your face.
It's not a bad thing, but it means like my busy season picks back up like real soon. So
when does it pick back up? December?
I enjoy April through June. I enjoy it. My calendar is completely open and free. And then July is open enrollment till the end of August.
Oh my gosh.
So then it gets busy.
Yeah.
Right after that, it gets nuts.
April through June, that's literally just like maybe like 3 months-ish, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
It's not really a lot.
It's not.
Yeah. But I see you posting on Instagram and doing all your little reels, you know? I'm seeing you.
I'm trying to channel when I'm creating. I think of my inner Thu.
Oh.
Like, no,
there should be an inner Thu in everybody.
You guys, she did the little hands, like she did her little,
the little thingies.
A little dash of Thu in everyone as you're content creating. Just think of her and see how much better it gets. Because I'm thinking of her and I'm like, no. I don't want that there. I want that here. I'm going to sit here for 2 hours to figure out how to get it to go there, but that's where I want it.
That's so funny. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Thu.
Hi, y'all. This is Saley.
And we are here today to talk about new pharmacy practitioner experience.
Yes, guys. This is the NPN journey, the NPN life, the NPN hustle, the NPN survival guide.
Wait, what does NPN stand for? Because I only have new practitioner. What is the other N?
I put the N because I'm channeling APHA. Sorry.
No, what is it? I want to say the right one.
New Practitioner Network. That's what NPN is.
Oh, and I see.
And I think it's specific to APHA.
Yeah, not sponsored.
No, sorry.
We'll use that only when they sponsor us.
When they sponsor us. Come talk to us, APHA.
Yeah, but let me just tell you that there's going to be me sharing a lot of embarrassing mistakes yet again. What else is new? But I hope that it will shine some light on what it's like to start as a new pharmacist. You no longer have your preceptors. You no longer have the residency to hide behind. You are your full practicing pharmacist. And so
you are out here. You are out here and it is go time.
What Saley said last time. She's like, you are it.
You are it.
There's no one else.
There's no one coming, friend. You are it.
Yeah, but before we jump into all of that, if you're watching on YouTube, please like the video, subscribe, and write in the comments new problems that you struggle with as a new practitioner. And if you're listening to us, please rate and write a review. Let the people know why we are the best companion when you walk your dog or doing the dishes. We are your pharmacy besties.
We are. At this point, like, there's no arguing that. We are it.
We spent so much time together. You guys, we spent so many hours together now.
We are it. Seriously, guys, thank you so much for supporting us. Continue to support us. Continue to get your friends involved. Bring them on over. There's room for everyone. Like, share, and review. Please review the podcast. It helps other people find us as well, which is what we're doing this for. We are building a community. That doesn't happen if it's just me, Thu, and you. If it's just me, Thu, and you.
Yeah, that's just the three of us.
That's just a trio. But if we're building a community, we're kind of gonna need you to help us get out there and get everyone to know who we are so we can get this thing going. Thank
Yes,
you.
exactly. Thank you so much, everybody. All right. So let's talk about here. I'll ask you a first question. When was
Woo.
the first time that you realized, oh no, it's just me? There's no one else to help. I'm the pharmacist now. When
Me
was
too.
that moment? Describe it all for
It's
us.
Oh man. I think our residency program did got this part really, really right. They really conditioned us to start thinking and practicing and making decisions with a lot of autonomy, but knowing how to recognize our limitations too. I think that that part of it was phenomenal and how they trained us. But I think I would have to say my ID rotation when I was the pharmacist on the consult service. I'm pre-rounding with the fellow and then connecting with the attending to vet all of our plans. This is when I'm going home and it's 4 hours at night. I'm reading because the fellow's like, what is X, Y, and Z? I wonder what studies say about that voriconazole versus itraconazole. And I'm like, okay, write it down. That's tonight's reading. Because the next day she expected me to come in with information for her. And I think it helped build my confidence tremendously before I got to my first job where it was we'll get there.
Oh God.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
I would say for me, the first time that I realized, oh no, I'm the pharmacist would be my PGY1 where I was staffing in the
Yeah.
inpatient pharmacy and I picked up
Yeah.
the phone and I said, pharmacist, how can I help you? And I was like, oh no, that's me. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. The scariest experience, the scariest experience was the first time I told a nurse something without checking and then watched her go do it. I literally was shaking. And I can still remember to this day what the question was. She wanted to know what the conversion was with levothyroxine from IV to PO. I'm fresh out of Naplex. I know this. I'm like, I'm not going to check with anybody. I know what the answer is. She walks off like she's going to go tell the provider and they're going to order the oral equivalent. There's a whole thing. A bunch of decisions are about to be made based on what I just said. I was shaking in my boots. I ran straight to my preceptor and I was like, okay, so I did a whole thing. I answered the question and I know I'm supposed to talk to you first and I'm so sorry. And she's like, you're licensed. Like she literally said it like, you're a pharmacist. Are you sure about what you answered? I was like, yes. I was like, but I really want to tell you. She's like, no, no. Are you sure what you did? I was like, yeah, but so of course I jump in my residency with my co-residents in the group chat. And I'm like, hey, what is the conversion rate for levothyroxine from IV to PO? But it was to like hindsight thinking about it, the level of fear, that I felt
Mhm.
so unreasonable, but it was so real. I was deathly
Well,
afraid.
but I mean, it's all about practice experience too. If you
Yeah.
don't have that experience, you do feel terrified at every recommendations you make because you're like, oh no, what I say means something now.
Yes.
um,
Uh,
I would say the second time that I felt that kind of fear was when I was actually in my first job. I had already did a PGY1, PGY2, and so this was my first year as a actual no more residency. I'm a full-time pharmacist now. It was like something really basic like a renal dose adjustment on a medication, but it was kind of like a little bit more complex because the renal function was kind of like, it was going up and down kind of thing and I made a decision and then I went and talked to another colleague and I was like, do you think this is okay? And like looking back, hindsight, I'm like, that is so embarrassing because I literally got 2 years of residency, and I need a preceptor in a way. You know,
Yeah,
I need their reassurance.
it's
But
so normal.
it's, it is normal because what
So
I've
normal.
learned, and someone told me this before too, is doing residency does not mean that there's no learning curve at all. It just
Period.
means that the learning curve is much smaller for you compared
Yeah,
to somebody who maybe didn't do a residency or did 1 year compared to 2 years or whatever it might
yeah,
be. So there is still going to be that growth period where it feels like you're dying.
yeah,
Feels like you're
and all,
failing at every corner.
every corner, right? And also, one of the things that residency is supposed to teach you, and they're really, really supposed to pay attention to this, is recognizing your limitations because your choices, your decisions have immediate impact. That was why I fell in love with ICU when I was a student, because the pharmacist's recommendation, the impact of that, I can see it in the labs in 2 hours. In 4 hours, that person looks completely different. Like I have
Yeah.
to grab a whole new patient monitoring form because their clinical status has changed so much out of pharmacy just saying, do this. And
Yeah.
now they're a completely different clinical status. That's what I really made me like fall in love with acute care in the first place. But the preceptors and your RPD, there should be really paying attention to you as a new pharmacist for how comfortable you are recognizing your limits. And also, there's a difference between you as a new practitioner coming to somebody and saying, I just got a question about how to convert somebody from amio drip to the tablet. There's a difference between that question and, hey, I have a patient in this room in this bed. I'm converting them from amio drip to PO. I've done my math. This is what I have. I want to double check it with somebody. There's a huge difference between those two approaches. And residency is supposed to teach you how to double check your work, not make your work other
Right.
people's problems. You know what I
The
mean?
first one is what you would expect from a student, just being like, I
Student.
don't know how to go from amio drip to tablet. And
Correct.
the second one is expected of a pharmacist. I already did all of this work, but I
Yeah.
haven't done this that much, or I don't feel super comfortable with it yet.
Yes.
Please double check me. Because double
Correct.
checking is really important
Super
in a
important.
clinical practice. You
Gosh.
are making decisions to affect that could affect somebody's life in a positive or negative way. You should
100%.
feel comfortable going and asking your colleagues for that second opinion. You should definitely feel comfortable. If you don't, that's a red flag.
Right? So
Red flag.
that right click right there. Right click right there. Right click right there. That is why I am so passionate about intellectually and psychologically safe working environment. When people don't know, they should feel safe enough to be able to come to someone and say, I am unsure. Help me through this TPN calculation. Help me through this drip rate. Help me through. There should be no stigma, and that person shouldn't have any anxiety around coming to you and asking that. I say this all the time. There is nothing more dangerous on the floor than an overly confident learner. I don't want my resident overly confident. I don't want my students overly confident. I need you to be overly confident and knowing that I'm here to back you up. But resident that is overly confident and you're just out there like, I know everything, nothing freaks me out more.
What's more dangerous if Saleh gave the nurse a recommendation on levothyroxine conversion and then tells no one else,
Yeah.
especially if you're really just starting on your residency journey or pharmacy journey and you don't
Yeah.
just like run it across your preceptor or run it across somebody. That should be kind of a practice that you do in the beginning. And as
Yes.
you slowly become more comfortable, like the next person and the third person and the fourth person ask you about levothyroxine conversion, you can stop with that.
It
You
just,
don't need to double check anymore. You've got it.
we did this last week.
Yeah.
We did this
Stop
last week.
asking me about this.
Enough with the levothyroxine question. Let's move on.
Yeah. You got this. But no, that's very true. I think that is one of the biggest mistakes that I made when I first started my real job is feeling, well, I mean, it's a little bit my problem and it's a little bit of the environment, but I did feel really scared to ask for help because I just felt like, oh, I'm this brand new practitioner, but all the other ones that were working around me, I didn't think that like anybody was asking anybody else for opinions. And so I felt like
Ah,
I'm the idiot going to
yeah,
ask people for help or
gotcha.
for a second opinion for their thoughts. And so and then of course I was like, I did 2 years of residency. I should know this stuff. I should be able to figure this out.
Yeah,
What I didn't expect was the workload when you start at somewhere new, a brand new facility. There's the culture that you have to get used to. There's
yeah,
ways to talk to providers and certain
yeah,
providers over others that you have to learn. That's the
yeah,
learning curve that you don't get trained on.
yeah.
There's other stuff like sometimes a certain alert will pop up, and like as a new person, you will go and get that alert fixed, even though all of your senior members are
Yeah.
like, yeah, we don't deal with that alert anymore. That's a stupid one. But you
We just
wouldn't know that.
we just hit acknowledge.
Exactly, because they're like, yeah, I mean that's an alert that pops up on a system level, but on a facility level it doesn't matter. But you wouldn't know that
Know
unless
that.
you ask for help or double check
Oh,
with someone or like if you're
yeah.
unsure. But I really think that that would be something that if I had to go back and do over again, I would
Yeah.
give myself so much grace of being
Yeah.
like, I don't know this and I'm going to ask, even if I feel like an idiot, even if
Yeah.
they treat me like an idiot, this is for patient safety and that matters more than my own ego.
A hundred
So,
percent.
yeah.
And like as a person who made a mistake before that actually reached a patient as a resident, it is one of the worst feelings ever. And I still remember that error. I still remember it vividly. It was a vancomycin, right? It was a vancomycin error. And even though after the investigation, it was cleared up that it was an error that any other pharmacist could have made, I attributed it to my inexperience. I attributed it to your any other good pharmacist would have caught this. Like it's you. What is wrong with like why didn't you just invent? Why were you so eager to just jump in? But that was my job as the resident on call to handle all the new Vancos, right? So if there's missing information in the patient's chart, how would I have been able to know that there's information missing? But even with knowing that, and I was glad I went through that experience. And I remember journaling about that mistake because I really wanted to pause and like think about how I felt making that mistake and he reached the patient and all that. It was reverted, like nothing permanent happened to the patient or anything. But how I felt when that mistake happened, I don't go to work every day to cause harm. I go to work every day to be part of the solution, but somehow I contributed and did the opposite. So it was like asking myself, how do I make sure I never feel this? Or if I'm going to feel this, it has to be because I it can't be because I did something wrong. And that was just to dedicate and commit myself to learning and dedicating and committing myself to getting feedback and letting go of any external emotions that I could have about asking for help. And those are the things that I have kind of done to help make sure I minimize my chances of an error because I'm sure we'll get to it. Making a mistake
Making a
as a new
mistake.
practitioner, it's going
I've
to
done that
happen.
so many times from the smallest things
Yeah.
like telling a provider, hey, the potassium's low for this patient. Could you order replacement? And them saying, oh, he didn't get any in the ED. And I said, no, I don't think so. And then I went back and he got it in the ED. And so I had to reach out to them again and say, I was wrong. He did get in the
Right.
ED. I used to be so hard on myself and having to go back
Yeah.
and correct my mistake. But
Yeah.
if I learn anything, going back and correcting my mistakes, yes, it makes kind of a negative first impression sometimes, especially if you're new, but it also shows the other providers that you can go back and correct your mistakes, which I think overall will build trust at the end of the day.
That's
But yeah,
it.
making those mistakes, sometimes you get the cold sweats. I've definitely had the cold sweats when somebody's like, "Hey, Doctor so and so is looking for you." Cold sweat, right? And
Looking for me?
yeah, I know. I'm like, what do they want? Like,
What
what
did
did
I
I do
do?
this time? Yeah, exactly. That's the first thing that you always think of is like, what did
Yeah,
I do?
I do.
It's
Mm-hmm.
so scary. It's like a gut punch every time.
Yeah.
My mistake was a warfarin dosing, and luckily nothing bad did happen, but it was, warfarin is scary.
It
And
is.
I mean, luckily there is an antidote, so it's like, ugh, but I had given a dose that I didn't see that they were given a dose earlier or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see that. And so it's part of the practice. Then you say, every time I order something, I double check, I triple check to make sure that I know when the last dose was given. But it's just sometimes you have to learn from those mistakes. It's better if
Yeah.
you don't. But it's like you take it and you move forward and you don't
Yeah.
allow it to fester in your body. Because let me
Yeah.
tell you, if I allowed those mistakes to fester, I probably would have quit very
100%.
quickly.
A
Very
100%.
quickly. Yeah.
Like one
Yeah.
of my preceptors told me that when I was on an appy, my Georgetown rotation, and she told me, she's like, mistakes, if you're in healthcare, it's not a question of, are you going to make it? Maybe you'll do it, maybe you won't. You will make a mistake. You will. What you are working hard to make sure doesn't happen is that mistake is a careless mistake. And that mistake is secondary to your lack of diligence. Or even worse, that mistake you stood by and you watched something happen that ended up hurting a patient. And I think what she meant by that is if you know that a recommendation is so far left and wrong and you don't fight that, and you're just like, well, I told them not to do it. You are just as responsible for what happens to that patient as the person who executed that incorrect order. And it really it instilled this principle in me that as a new practitioner, even if I was scared of talking to a nurse or talking to a provider, I would go to my clinical manager and my coordinator that has been there much longer than me, and they may have a relationship with that provider that I just don't. And I've benefited from that, where like one of my preceptors was like, who's the provider? And I was like, such and such. She's like, oh, she grabs her phone and texts him. I was like,
Yeah.
and I was
Yeah.
just, I was standing there and I was like, it's that easy? She's like, well, we all started here in the same residency class. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
you have
Wow.
right? Like you have history. You've come up
Yeah.
in this institution together. I'm in residency 6 months, and I'm like, I really don't think that that's how that works.
Yeah.
So the mistake thing and preparing yourself for it mentally, it's okay. But again, you cannot cut corners and make a mistake, and you cannot not do your due diligence and make a mistake. That's the mistake that will haunt you. But the
Mm-hmm.
idea that you're going to practice for 20, 40 years and you're never going to miss something, it's unrealistic. So let's
Yeah.
just let go
Unrealistic.
of that expectation right now.
Because
Oh
sometimes the workload
gosh.
is significant. And the most important thing is to learn to be efficient.
Yeah,
So, how do I create a practice style or create a workflow for myself that will get me to hit all of the things I need to hit without having all this external stuff?
yeah,
That's the part of training as a student, as a resident, that you need to identify is how do I be more efficient, looking at things that matter versus like taking an hour or two deep diving into stuff that may not even matter for acute care. Because if
absolutely.
I'm talking to a resident or a student that I'm precepting and they've been digging into the chart for 2 hours looking at an A1C from 3 years ago when the patient came in with, I don't know, a stroke, or not a stroke, because you know, diabetes may
That
be
could be
important.
related, or they're
With like a PE or something.
a
I'm like,
PE,
okay,
yeah.
it may not matter what the A1C is. We need to figure out what's happening right now, and then we can figure out what the A1C is when you have time. But that's how you learn to be more efficient.
You
I
can
would
go hang out. You can go hang out with the internal medicine people.
no.
They really care about that A1C from a
They
million
love
years
A1Cs.
ago.
They love
They're-
A1Cs. They love a cholesterol panel. Sometimes they love an iron panel.
they do.
They love ordering those. Vitamin
Yeah.
B12, folate. They love those stuff. Vitamin D.
How dare you? How dare you talk about us that way? How dare you? How dare you talk about us that way? We
I'm
love
like,
it.
can we get back to the pneumonia, please?
Honey, please. And like when they come to me and I'm just like, antibiotics for how many more days? How many have they already received? How many? Wait, why are we doing 7 more days? Who do I need to talk
Yeah,
to? That's all I care about at that point, right? But
right.
the students, they want to go back. Intubation. And I'm like, dear, listen, we are TOC,
I mean,
like
sometimes you have to, so that's why you need to know time and place, people. Time and place. One thing I would say as a new practitioner, especially in a new workplace, is to know what your resources are. Some of the things that frustrates me so much as a practicing provider for 10 years now is that resources and guidelines change
oh boy.
constantly,
Yeah.
so frequently.
Yeah.
I would say that as soon as you reach that residency door, you open the door and you walk in and you're a resident, you get rid of those school notes. You get rid of them. You burn them. I don't know what you do with them, but you get rid of them. They are no longer relevant. Do not ever tell your preceptor or
Oh
worst of all, a
gosh.
provider that my school did
Oh,
X, Y, and Z. Throw up. Like
oh
talk about
God.
embarrassing. Don't do it.
Bomb atrocious.
Atrocious. No, you
So
can
sad.
use your classroom notes to start like a baseline, but then build on it by reading the guidelines yourself,
Yeah.
or use certain resources like Up to Date or whatever that might be, but don't don't rely on your school notes. Like it's
Yeah,
only good for
it's
maybe
not.
1 year and that's it.
Yeah, at
'Cause
the most,
at the
like
most.
at the most, like you have that 1 year. But like again, we have other resources out now that's helping us, right? Like Pearls is out here and it's definitely a great resource for you for your
Yeah.
quick tidbits. My advice to you, something that I think served me really, really well. If I'm asked a question on round and my focus is getting the answer to that question, once I have response to that question, I write that thing down as something I need to go back and look into and read
Deep
further,
dive. Yeah.
right? Make deep dives something that you just get used to. Just embrace it, just love it.
Yeah.
What it does is anytime that concept comes up again, guess who's ready to do more than just give a response? They're ready to engage in an intellectual exchange about it. It's you. So if you have a provider where you need to make your case, you're ready for that because last time you just gave one answer, but this time you went home and you read up about it. You understand how all the nuances of the thing now. You can engage in a much more productive intellectual
Yeah.
conversation about that topic. That's what you want. That trust that you want, that respect that you want. That's where that comes from.
And
That
guess
doesn't
what?
come from showing up to rounds every day and standing there and not contributing. That's not where that
Guess
comes from.
what? You, as a practicing provider for 10 years almost now, I still do that. I
Yeah,
still look stuff up and do
yeah,
deep dives and showing up, providing information that's beyond what you can kind of Google or, look up on
exactly.
lexicon real fast. So,
Absolutely.
but if you love the pharmacy profession enough and you love your topic enough that you would enjoy the deep dives because you're
I
like,
agree.
oh,
I
I
know.
didn't know that this was the background behind XYZ. Like, this is so cool. So,
I thought I was the only nerd that like enjoyed. I always call it my in front of TV reading tonight. Because during commercial break, that's when I'm reading it. And like,
oh,
and like my practice site, everyone used to make fun of me about that. Oh, ask Sally. She probably knows the paper about it. I have a whole folder on DI questions and related papers. So when people call and ask me, I have this patient where this and this and this is going on, I can tell you what to do about the patient right now. but I'm also emailing you the
Mhm.
papers and the things that I read for me to get good command of that concept so that you can also get good command moving forward.
Totally. Yeah.
Right?
One of the things I want to talk about is setting boundaries because
Oh boy.
when I graduated PGY1 and then moved on to PGY2 and then I graduated that and then started my first real job, I thought I had everything figured out, which is
Yeah.
so ugh. At this point I'm embarrassed by that. But when I started my first big pharmacy girl job, I thought I could handle anything that comes my way because I felt like residency has taught me to do so much work in one
Yeah.
year that I felt like I could continue that and sustain that. So when I first started at my first job, I not only had a bunch of new things that I needed to learn, but now I'm given all these pharmacy students all at
Yeah.
once, like literally back to back to back, two per rotations for
Yeah.
like a whole year because whoever that was in the position before me had established that already. And so then when I came into it, it was like, here's all these students. And I thought that I could handle it because, my PGY2 was at a university, and I was like, I have the experience of precepting. I can do this.
Ah,
But what I realized is that not only was my precepting really poor because I was very distracted by having to develop a new practice at this new
yeah.
site, but my practice was also distracted by having all these students. And I
Mm,
think if I had to do it over again, I would say that I would set that boundary. I would say,
absolutely.
I'm brand new here. I don't know anyone
Absolutely.
here. I still need to
Yeah.
develop relationships with other providers.
Yeah.
I feel more comfortable if I'm given one student at a time, or maybe share the student with somebody,
Yeah.
or just not have students at all.
At all.
Let me actually develop my practice site so that I'm more
Absolutely.
prepared. But I didn't do that, and I
Absolutely.
burned out so fast.
Oh
And not only
no.
that, that year I had some pretty negative feedback from students as well. Maybe just one or two. Out of like all of the ones I had, I definitely had some pretty negative feedback that made me really reflect back on, okay, I probably shouldn't have gone so hard and think that I could handle all of that just because I did all
Yeah.
this residency. I needed to set actual realistic boundaries to help
Yeah.
me succeed. Like at the end of the day, you need to think about yourself and how can I
Yeah.
succeed in this role? And saying
Absolutely.
no to certain things, even it makes you feel like you kind of failed a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's necessary.
It is. And the thing I want to kind of press on a bit about that with because what Thu's describing, that example, it's not like uncommon. You can find yourself in a new role and they'll pile a bunch of things on you. You got to remember, conditioning is so important. You just came out of residency where it was all about your ability to get it done, get through it, get it done, get through it. You need to understand that that season of your life is over, done, period. Book
Yeah.
closed, door closed, burn down the building, it's gone. We're
Ah,
done with we're done with that. As a new practitioner now, this new chapter of your career, you really, it's imperative that you understand that it is okay to ask for time to learn how to practice independently before they go adding other things onto you. You don't have anything to prove to anybody. Like, you've proved enough to yourself. You got through residency. I don't know if there's anything else you need to do to prove to yourself that you have what it takes. This season of your life, if residency is done with, it's about learning how to practice independently, how to do that confidently, how to do that safely. So if you have to have a difficult conversation to say, all of what you're offering are things I'm absolutely interested in and would love to participate and do. At this juncture, however, I just don't think that I can balance getting acclimated to working independently and post residency and also serving as preceptor for student pharmacists. One of these things are going to suffer. And in that situation, neither of those things need to suffer. We just need to tell the school we're unavailable this cycle.
yeah, and
That's
and they can handle it. It is their job, and
possibility.
yeah, that's their responsibility to then accommodate for your needs.
Mhm.
Unless on your like practice site or job description that it says you have to do these things, then you may need to negotiate.
Oh,
But you know, it's the school's job to take care of the students that you said no
true.
to. It is, unfortunately, but you have to put yourself first. You do.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And
yeah,
not feel
setting the
guilty
boundaries.
about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Like,
No.
don't have and like really work hard not to have an emotional response to saying no. Um, this is it's a and I know it's a place we get to. Um, I still struggle with it. Like my bad habit post residency, how many years now I still have, is not taking a lunch break.
Oh, yeah,
I still work through my lunch. I still just come in and I sit down and I work from the beginning to the end. And I don't take a break once in a while. Like if my husband comes and's like, let's have lunch. And I'm in the cafeteria and I'm like, this is why people don't play with their lunchtime. This is amazing. I come back to work with a brand new attitude, just a
yeah,
30 minutes break away from things. It's so refreshing.
yeah.
Um, Boundaries. We can't say
Boundaries.
enough about it.
And I, the other thing about boundaries that's very much related to it is a toxic work environment
Oh
and
boy.
how to handle something like that and the hard lessons. So let's take a quick break because
Yes.
we have lots more to talk about. But when we get back, we're going to touch on the hard lessons that I had to learn. And I'm sure you learned some really hard lessons.
Yeah.
The moments where you feel like crying at work. Yeah, let's get real
Ugh.
vulnerable.
Or you,
But
you
yeah,
actually did it, or you actually did
um,
cry.
you closed the office door and you
Right.
cried. So we'll be right back. Hi, everybody. We are back. And all right, time to put on the vulnerable blanket
Ugh.
and share the actual, I mean, not just embarrassing stories, but like the really the hard stories, hard lessons that we
Yeah.
had to learn. I'll go first
Ugh.
because I do love sharing these types of stories. Hopefully that it makes you feel more um, or less alone in your own
Yeah. I was
doing.
like
Yeah,
less isolated and
less
alone.
isolated, and you don't feel like you're the only one that's happening to. That everybody experienced this at some point. For me, it was my first year as a pharmacist, and it was the year of one of the worst like flu situation that was happening. This was like 2015, 2016. I can't remember the exact year, but flu season was horrendous that year. And the hospital was just filled up with flu cases constantly. ICU was filled up with flu cases. And of course, that year, I was put to work during Thanksgiving weekend. The new kid has to work, you know, one of the big weekends, right? One of the big holidays and weekends. It was 4 days straight in a row where I had to cover two hospitals, including ICUs in both sites. It was intense. I was the only clinical pharmacist and I had a resident with me. Or maybe it was my second year. I don't remember because that would be crazy if they made me do that my first year now that I think about it, but it could have been.
Probably
Who knows,
could have
honestly.
been.
Um so I was working, it was kind of like the last day of this long stretch of coverage and I was so ready. I was so burned out by the end. I was ready to go. I was ready to go home, take a break, and I got this call from an infectious disease doctor. He was in the ICU, and he's really stressed out about a patient. And he's like, "Hey, can you look at this case? There's Pseudomonas growing in the sputum, and it's resistant to everything. Could we do doripenem?" Which we didn't have doripenem. It was not a formulary. Is that doripenem? I can't remember. Yeah, I think it might have been. Um,
Oh
and
wow.
I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" Okay, so I open up. I mean, I'm covering ICU at this point. I open up a patient's chart and I see that the Pseudomonas was not resistant to
To
everything. That
everything.
it was susceptible to meropenem. But
I'm so shocked. I'm so
what I
shocked.
didn't realize though was that I was looking at the wrong chart. I was looking at the wrong chart. I was looking at a
Oh,
different ICU patient, and mind you, like this this provider did have an accent. I didn't really have the heart. And this is why I say, like, double check, ask questions. I didn't have the heart to be like, could you repeat that? Or like double check on the patient's name. I was just so like nervous already because it was this like really hard question I've never had to deal with. I was flustered and I was coming off of this really long weekend. I was like, I see that it's susceptible meropenem. What are you talking about? And he went off on me. He was like, I mean, I can't remember what he said, but he's just basically like, "You're being incompetent. I need to know if we can use this medication. Can I talk to a different pharmacist?" He was really upset at me, which, hindsight, I understand. Like, he's really stressed out. The hospital's filled with flu cases. Everybody's sick in the ICU. We've got Pseudomonas growing everywhere. I understand, like, it's very stressful for providers. But when I got this type of response, I mean, talk about full body chills, like cold sweat, all the works, right? And I was like, okay, let me just talk to somebody else. And so luckily my supervisor was there. I got to finally look at the right chart. I see it. It's resistant to everything. Talk to my supervisor, trying to see if we can get a non-formulary medication to be used for this patient. It was a whole thing, and it was like this long 4-day holiday stretch. It was so exhausting. The sad thing about that experience was, I did feel really upset afterwards, and I did my best to get over that. The thing that really disappoints me of that situation was that my relationship with that provider was never the same, and he was one of like the main infectious disease doctors at that hospital. So having a good relationship with him would have been really useful for me moving forward in that career. But the problem was, it was one of my first weekends ever, and I made this mistake. It wasn't even like a clinical mistake, you know what I
It's
mean?
just
And
an
that's the thing that
oversight. And it's so, do you
exactly.
know how, I'm just trying to think how many times I have been in that situation. Do you know how easy it is to be having two separate conversations because they're looking at one chart and you're looking in another chart? And it's so easy.
Yeah.
It's so, or they're
It's
looking at labs from 2 hours ago, you're looking at labs from 8 hours ago.
it's like you need to
Like,
refresh the but yeah, you need to
you
click the
need to,
refresh button, you
you
have
didn't
it.
click refresh. You
Yeah.
didn't click refresh. So they're like,
Yeah.
what are you talking? Like,
Yeah.
and they're frustrated because they're
It's
like,
a
what are you
but
looking
it's
at?
a frustrating environment. It's a very
Tiredness.
stressful
Oh,
it's almost like like a soda bottle. The pressure in there is high and it
yeah.
takes just a little bit of a flip to just whoosh, like explosion. And
That's
that's the biggest disappointment for me, and that's the hard lesson that I had to learn was sometimes you will just make these mistakes that are very small and relative to everything else,
I
but can
know.
really ruin relationships. But
Yeah.
and it's like the thing is, I can't even tell people to prevent that because you never know when that's going to happen. I think that
No.
my biggest advice for that would just to be resilient,
Yeah.
hang on to your belief that you are a great practitioner, and just
Yes.
keep going forward, even if this provider will never be this best friend of yours anymore, or whatever it
Yeah.
might be, that you've kind of messed up that first impression, that it's okay and you can keep moving forward. There are still more people that you can build support with and build a connection
Absolutely.
with,
Absolutely.
and just keep moving forward, because at the end of the day, 6-7 years later after that experience, our relationship between me and that provider, it was never this open communication or anything, but it's still healed over time. And
Yeah.
it's not like he'll always come to me, I'm like his first pharmacist choice, but it still is a working relationship. It's workable. It's okay by the end. And funny enough, like when I got COVID and then developed asthma afterwards, I reached out to him, and he was one of the first provider to write me a prescription for a fluticasone inhaler. So, it's okay at the end of the day, and that's maybe the lesson is you can't please everybody, and
Yeah.
it's okay. Just keep moving forward. Trust yourself.
It is. I mean, workplace conflict is going to happen. And when you have a personality like mine, it's almost like you're wearing a sign that says, hey, over here, I like conflict. Come here. Come to me. Come to me. Me. It's me. You're looking for me. Conflict.
I'm
Conflict,
the
girl.
problem.
I'm the problem. Come to me. You know what I mean? But for me as a pharmacist, I've always viewed conflict as like this opportunity to open to give people an idea and perspective or teach people about who I am, right? I always have time to teach people how to talk to me and how to treat me. I am never too busy to tell somebody or show somebody that their behavior or the way that they're speaking to me is not acceptable, and I am not going to tolerate it. The thing that I have found really difficult and disappointing was that much of the conflict and issues that I faced in my career have been internal, interdepartmental. Externally, with providers, nurse practitioners, and nurses, I have had very little issue with stuff with collaborating externally. But interdepartmentally, it's always problematic. But so this one example is kind of like there's nothing I hate more than workplace gossip. It's a pet peeve. I hate it so much. So this pharmacist was told that I was talking bad about the residency program, that I was telling a student. Actually, she interpreted it. So it's not even that I was talking bad about the program, but her interpretation of what she was told made her feel like I was talking bad about our residency program. My advice to the student, I was having a conversation with a student, and I told a student that I was talking about my experience. That was the other thing that was really odd about this, about why you were so upset about my experience. I told them that I did my residency at a large academic medical center because variety was very important to me. I was interested in acute care, but I also was very curious about a lot of different things. So I didn't want to end up doing a residency somewhere that didn't offer me the opportunity to rotate outpatient, do things like bone marrow transplant or hematology oncology. I picked big programs or programs that had a lot of electives because I was curious, and I made sure that they were level 1 trauma center because I was interested in acute care. Not the student I was talking to, someone else who overheard that conversation told this pharmacist that, and she took it as a personal attack on our residency program, which doesn't have any of those things. That I am discouraging. I heard that you're discouraging students from applying to our program because we don't have things like bone marrow transplant and things like that. So I had to cut that off because I was a new pharmacist there. And like, I don't know you, you don't know me. That was like my first reaction. But also, number two, I have been in trouble enough to know that certain conversations, I need a third party to be present because I don't want to be accused of what I said and what I didn't say. So what I told her was just that, number one, are you asking me to confirm or deny a rumor because you were not there when this conversation took place? And number two, whoever told you that, when they're ready to be present, then we can have this conversation. But at this juncture, I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave, but we're not having this conversation because you're asking me to confirm or deny a rumor. And the person who told you this information doesn't want to come forward for us to have the conversation openly.
Yeah.
Right? I was thoroughly annoyed by that because that's not what I said, but also I was speaking about what I did and how I made my decision. I never talked about the program. My advice to you is pick your battles because for me, what I have learned is not every hill is worth dying on. It's just not.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that rumor and that perception they have of you of being confrontational, difficult, argumentative, difficult to work, is that a hill you want to go to battle over? But if it's not, leave it alone. Don't
Yeah.
focus on it. you're not going to be able to fight every single fight, whether it's with a provider, whether it's with a nurse, whether it's with your manager. Every fight isn't a fight you should take up. It's the biggest lesson I've learned. I used to feel like I have time every day, all day. You pick the right girl. Today, you're going to learn. I'm not the one to mess with. But as time has gone on and I've grown in my career, I've just realized there are hills I'm willing to die on. Like straight up racist things that are done to me, it's a hill I'm willing to die on. Straight up things that you're doing to jeopardize my reputation and my practice and my advancement, that's a hill I'm willing to die on. But office gossip and this one doesn't want to invite you to brunch, or these three always go to brunch together and they don't want you to come, and that's okay. I have enough
Yeah.
other people I can brunch with.
I love that you say that because when I first started working at my previous facility, there were already groups of friends that have formed,
Uh-huh.
and I was one of the newer pharmacists, and they did invite me out to a couple of things, but then, obviously they mainly did stuff on their own, and I felt like, oh, what's wrong with me? Like, maybe I'm
Let
not
it
cool enough
go.
to be their friends or whatever. And when I see
Let it
them
go.
in like the lunchroom or something, I'll try to make up a conversation, and the response would be very lackluster, and I'd be like, oh, they just don't
Oh,
want to talk to me.
oh
What I've kind of
no.
realized though is that I put way too much pressure on
Yeah.
why don't they like me? How can I be their friend?
Uh,
I realized that maybe those people are just kind of boring and they have nothing to say. Like it has nothing to do with
with
me.
you
And
at
that
all.
maybe those people are so freaking socially
Awkward.
inept. Awkward. Okay, yeah, awkward's a better word. That
Yeah.
maybe it has nothing to do with me. And what I realized is that the friends that I did end up making
Yes.
and that the relationships that I did build without having to always be wondering like what about me, what about me, invite me, the ones that do show up for you are the more meaningful ones.
They
And
are.
eventually, it takes time for people to kind of shift their mindset and all of this, and eventually I did become at least friendly with a lot of my coworkers.
Yeah,
And even the ones that didn't really hang out with me before, I became friends with them and built a friendship with them. But
exactly.
you know what? Like, it's okay.
It's
It's okay.
okay. Let it go.
Yeah.
Let it
Yeah.
go. It's not, I can, I had I have put so much pressure on myself because of that. I used to because of that. But those are the two things I just learned about managing a toxic work environment. It's I had to choose my battles and fight. What are the things that I am absolutely just not going to let fly? Let me get clarity on that. What are the things that I also need to stop giving so much energy to?
Yeah.
And let me just see that happening and say, okay, I'm gonna go.
Yeah. You don't need to spend so much time on everything. You're 100% right. I love that point. And the last thing that I want to talk about is the idea that when you first start working out, and you've hinted at this in a previous episode, where when you're a student, when you're a resident, people want to build you up, they want to support you, they want to see you grow and
Yeah,
flourish as a pharmacist. And then as soon as you leave that trainer area of, era of your life, yeah, as soon as you leave that trainer era of your life, they become the opposite. They
it's weird.
question your abilities to do anything. They're always double checking, make sure that everything you're doing is correct. There's always you feel like there's eyes on you that not in a positive way. It's almost like they want to catch you making a mistake. Have you ever felt like that before? Do you have any specific advice or experience about that?
It's the weirdest thing to me. Um, but and I have experienced this and I've seen other students experience it that reached out for advice about this. People that mentor you, that have been your supporters and your cheerleaders can absolutely turn on you. It is the weirdest
Oh my
dynamic. I
God.
don't know why it happens or how it happens because for me, I always tell the students, like, I just want an opportunity to be in the audience and holding up a sign for you to say, I know her or I know him. I want to see you on the biggest stages. I want to see you doing the most amazing things, accomplishing everything you want to go after. Like, I low key just love to be cheering people on in the crowd. So it's a difficult concept for me. The only thing I can tell you is, first of all, it's going to take you a while to even realize what's happening. That's what makes this so dangerous, because you forever are going to take ownership and think, I'm just not delivering. I'm just not working hard enough. I'm slacking. Oh my God, I'm such a disappointment. After everything they've done for me, I'm not delivering. I'm not delivering. It has nothing to do with you. You're doing what you've always done, which is just put your heart and soul into everything you do. The other people around you, they're the ones that have decided to switch up, that they no longer want to be a cheerleader, but they want to be like a critical evaluator of you.
Wait, can you give us an example? How does someone know that this switch has occurred? Like
I know, it's
what gave you
crazy.
the red flag? Like what are some red flags?
So, in my experience, a person that I was constantly able to rely on for everything, the things that they helped me accomplish, I had done it. And all of a sudden, it was kind of like they became unavailable. Then, when it's like I send things for review, I don't hear back. Then it's like the week when things are due, I'm like, I'm just checking in to see if you've had a chance to review this. Oh, well, I was waiting for this, and this, and I never received this, and this. And this is completely unacceptable because now it's due this week and you expect me to do this. I'm very confused now, because what we said was, I'm going to do a lit search and send you all of the articles I've identified. You will start by clearing that those articles are appropriate so I can do a literature summary. And now I don't have a list of cleared articles, but you're looking for an article summary. I'm confused. And this is where another mentor started to teach me the art of journaling at work. When you have a verbal meeting with somebody on a project, on anything, this is what we're going to do. You're going to do this, and this by this date, and then send it to me, and I will do this by this date. Send a follow-up email recapping what was discussed at the meeting, because it will always just be what you said over what they said. I lost an entire relationship over this. An entire project got scratched completely after I've put in a million hours working on it, because they decided that they did not want their name on the project and be my preceptor anymore. And what I did to deserve that, to this day, it is unclear to me.
Wow.
Right. And
That's so weird.
it was such a power move, because I had no choice but to start all over on a brand new project when I had no time. But I have spent 4 months working on this project, and you just were poor community. There was nothing we talked about that unfolded the way it was supposed to, but
Yeah.
it was always my fault. It was always my fault.
There is something
And because,
very
I didn't have any paper trail of all of the emails that went unanswered. I didn't have any recap of what was discussed. I didn't have, to this day, I always have a recap of any meeting with anybody. That's what I learned from that experience. Because as I'm sitting there in a meeting being told that you're going to withdraw and that I have to start all over, the only thing I can think about is cry, and cry
wow.
loud and publicly and ugly at work.
You did?
And I'm sitting at my desk and sobbing like a 5-year-old, because I am so deeply hurt. Not that I have to start over, but because I genuinely saw you as a person that I could have continue to learn from. And the project I was working on, I believed in that project's potential to become my first publication. But instead, now I'm doing some BS project on warfarin vitamin K reversal use in the
Hey.
ED. Sorry.
Hey.
Like
Warfarin vitamin
it,
Ks are important too.
it was, yeah, it was so meaningless versus this other thing could have been a publication. But that was a major, major learning curve for me. The people who step up to invest can turn on you. Be ready. Like so many other times that those like people try to play those games with me later and they failed horribly because guess what? We talked about this, this, and this, and my email said, please correct if any of these things are inaccurate or if the timeline is wrong. You replied back and said, yep, this is an accurate summary of what we talked about. So you can't come back to me and now tell me that you wanted 10 days earlier.
Yeah.
That's not what we talked about.
I'm
That's
not
not
gonna
how that.
lie. It's sad when you reach the point in your career where you do have to start documenting things. That just
Yeah,
shows how toxic things can get, which is so
exactly.
it's heartbreaking and you feel like you shouldn't have to do that, but at some point
No.
in my own career I did have to save certain emails and certain
Yeah.
folders, and I don't want to get into that today, but I did feel like I needed a way to keep track of things and like protect
Yeah.
myself when the things come, and it's so sad. Like,
It's
what?
sad.
Why do I have to do that at work? Like, I sometimes I think about this and it makes me so angry, is that healthcare is probably one of the most stressful jobs of all. The other, a while ago I had to deal with a patient who exhibited drug-seeking behaviors and have to deal with them, and they were causing so much chaos in the workplace just so that people could do what they want. That's like one of their tactics, right? One of their manipulation tactics.
Yeah.
So you're already feeling so much stress about having to deal with a toxic person, like not even coworker, but a toxic patient. And then you turn around and you have to deal with toxic coworkers. And you're like, I'm already stressed working here, dealing with all sorts of people, and then you're not making my life any easier. You would think that in a healthcare environment that we would all support each other, because we all know how hard things can be. But there are people. I watched this one TikToker, Instagram nurse. His name is Alex RN, I think. I don't remember his. We'll have to link him. But he says all the time, he's like, nurses like to eat their young. And I don't think that pharmacist necessarily is that brutal, but there is a component of a lot of.
Are you sure? I feel like I was.
Well,
I feel like I was on. I feel like I was on this preceptor's plate, and it wasn't just. It was to discredit me. It was to humiliate me. It was to beat me down, and I felt every inch of every lash. I mean, coming into work, I was humiliated because the narrative that was pushed out there was that I was incapable. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't like this was the perception that was put out there about me. But this is what I talk about personal branding. This is why a personal brand that endures is more powerful than anything you could ever invest in. Because if it wasn't for the personal brand that I had already built, I felt like she had effectively done what she needed to do to destroy my career. Right. But my personal brand and people who know me, people who knew me, people who've seen me in action and seen me work, the providers out there on the floor that I'm rounding with and working with, they have a completely different feedback for me about who I am and how I work and how I show up. So no, ma'am, it's you. It's not me. It's you.
Yeah. Oof. That's a
when
deep
you're
one.
new,
That's a painful one.
It's very
especially
painful.
When people go after your credibility.
Credibility.
In a workplace, in a healthcare facility or a healthcare setting where credibility means a lot, actually.
It's everything. Dude.
It's everything.
It's everything, right? How do we build trust with anyone? How do we build trust with anyone? And, people would tell me like, oh, we were verifying orders and then she saw your name on an order and she was like, oh, no wonder it's entered that way. It's entered all weird and wrong. Look who did it openly, right? Like you're saying things like that openly about me in front of other people. But those people you're saying it in front of, I've worked with them too.
Yeah.
They know that I'm not careless. They know that that's not how I work, right? Like this is a whole nother episode, I
It's a
think,
whole other episode.
on toxic preceptorship, right? But
Ooh,
the
we
thing for
do.
you as a new practitioner, I think, is we want you to be aware of what you could encounter and understand that there is nothing wrong with you. Like, you're not crazy. There's nothing wrong with you. But again, it's just picking your battles and picking the things that you are willing to go to that hill and lay down and say, this is where I will die.
I always say be self aware. If you have to improve
Yes,
on certain things, then you need to work on that.
you need
Don't
to work on it.
think that you're perfect and there's nothing that you should change about yourself. If your intention is to grow and to always be better, then that
Yes,
will be the path that you're on. And but, not take every other criticism so heavily
person.
and personally into heart. Like, you have to be able to discern which ones are actually legitimate and which ones you think are just, you know,
Yeah,
BS that you don't need
it's
to worry about.
it's
I
background noise.
Last thing I want to talk about,
Yes.
because everything that we've been saying, it reminds me of positive reassurance and positive feedback. And I'll tell you guys something.
Yeah.
As a student and a learner, you're always asking for positive feedback and positive reassurance. Let me tell you something. When you become a pharmacist, that positive feedback and that positive reassurance is going to poof, dissipate into thin air. So if you are relying so heavily, yeah, it will, like, immediately as soon as you walk through the door, your first day of being a pharmacist, like a legit pharmacist, you're no longer in training.
Oh man.
The positive feedback and reassurance is something that you cannot rely on
Nope.
to move forward in your career. So
Career.
if that's something that you're desperate for, you need that in your life in order to know that you're doing okay.
Yeah.
You need to learn to practice not to rely on it anymore.
Yes. Yes.
Do it now if you're a learner. Do it now if you're still in training. Try not to rely so heavily
Gosh.
on the positive feedback, because unfortunately, a lot of managers are not taught to provide that kind of appreciation, that kind of feedback. I've gone through years in my career, my previous job, right? Years, just thinking that, okay, if I don't hear from them, that means that everything's okay. And when
Yes.
I did do something good and I don't always receive the appreciation, or I'll give you an example. I started going to rounds, one of the first pharmacists on my team to go to rounds on these multidisciplinary teams. And during a meeting, during like a staff meeting, someone gave me like the credit. They're like, "Oh, Thu started going on rounds, and what about you, so and so? You also started going on rounds." When I know for a fact that I was the one that started
Started in.
going and maybe invited that other person, and she goes sometimes, but not always.
Yeah.
And I have to share the spotlight with somebody else.
Yeah.
If you rely on
Yeah.
all of that so much, it you will burn out and your motivation will dissipate with it as well. So you have to really think about what it is that you need to thrive and survive in an environment that can be very difficult, that can
Oh,
feel
it can
toxic.
it can feel demoralizing. So in my previous role, I took over an entire clinic, developed a patient access program that went from saving patients $23,000 a year to $1.3 million a year. I never heard a bleep from upper management about what I was doing there, and there were people, executives, C-suite people at the other affiliate hospitals that were asking for me to meet with them to describe the program because they've heard about what I was doing from external entities and were interested on how I can help them put the program there. After I left that role, that program has now grown and established and continues to be, and is, if I was a person that needed, I would not have done what I did there for 4 years. It wouldn't have happened. But my satisfaction and that reassurance, that was coming from my patients, the people I was doing it for. So again, who are you doing it for? Get clarity about that quickly, because if you think that your manager is going to take notice, and you need to learn how to write your self-evaluations. talking about what it is that you do, becoming comfortable talking about what you do as a new practitioner, because there's nobody coming. Your manager in your evaluation is not coming to put in your evaluation how you're excelling and doing all this stuff. You know, like when I tell you about what my exit interview from that role was and how nothing about what I'd done there came up, it makes you rethink how much of yourself to give organizations as you move forward.
I didn't
Because,
even get an exit interview. My
right,
my
yeah,
supervisor didn't even know, forgot that I was leaving.
yeah. So
Talk about appreciation. You sometimes
appreciation,
you
right?
don't get it,
You don't
and you
get
have
it.
to be okay with that.
You have to be okay with it. Get okay with it early. You could knock out a project for your preceptor in 3 days that they gave you 10 days to do. You get it done in 3 days because of your experience or insight or whatever. And they'll just say, okay, great.
And that's
They'll move you on to the next thing. You learn to take pride in what you're accomplishing. You're going to save yourself so much heartache and pain,
yeah.
and take responsibility for your own advancement. And I was on a webinar the other day, they were talking about this. We need to be our own press and media. You need to write the article that goes in the hospital's newsletter about that cool thing you're doing for your patients. You need to submit that poster and go to that meeting and present on your initiative. You need to submit that speaker proposal so you can talk about how you're revolutionizing and transforming your clinic services and the things that you're doing. Your job and your manager, they don't owe you none of that. The
No.
sooner you figure that out, you're going to save yourself so much heartache.
Yeah.
So
100%.
much.
You know,
Yeah.
unfortunately, you have to be in control of your own career. We talked about this in the last episode. If
Yeah.
you haven't checked it out already,
Yeah.
it's available. But yeah, we touched on some really amazing
Yeah.
topics for
As a
this
new, I
episode.
think the only thing we didn't touch on, which we're planning, we're not going to leave you hanging, is money.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't talk about money, but money's a real thing. And negotiating your first salary and even salary negotiation moving forward. Thu and I are going to actively work on bringing you something very meaningful to help
Yes.
guide you on your journey with building a better relationship with your money and getting what you are worth. Like,
Yeah.
don't, don't get out here dispensing pharmacist knowledge for free. We're done. We're done with that.
Yes. Yes. I know. I love it. Any final thoughts? I think that was the final thought. I think that's
Yeah,
great. But
thank you.
yeah, well,
Just keep going.
keep going, guys. You guys got this. But thank you so much for listening. If this episode speaks to you and you think that others may benefit from hearing our stories, send this episode to them. This will help us reach even more people, and our community will be so big. Ah!
Our community will do this, like the positive reassurance that you keep wanting. Poof. It'll just explode.
Explode.
I loved your hand gesture. This podcast, this episode is available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. You can connect with both Thu and I independently or the show's page on Instagram. All of the handles of how you connect with us both individually or through the podcast is going to be linked below. And please, please, please support us, engage with us. We cannot do any of this without you. Until next time, everyone, don't forget, we got
We got this. Bye.
Bye, everybody.